All right. Well, everybody, we'll get going. People keep popping in here. That's cool, but I want to get going for y'all. And since you got here on time, thank you so much for joining us in August around this SEL forum that we'll be doing every month. So keep a lookout for all our little advertisements that'll come out. Today we're just going to be talking about 10 ways to create connection and community. Um, you know, there's only a few of us. If you want to keep your I know it says keep your camera on, but I get it. If you want to do, don't, whatever. But hopefully you're all into participating because that's kind of how we design these. Have some things to take some notes on. Please try to stay engaged. And if you're not going to talk, just keep your microphone muted and then unmute when you're ready to talk. And then use the chat box, raise your hand, use that little raise your hand or do whatever you need to do because, we'll be asking some questions and trying to engage with you because you all have probably better ideas than CJ and I. So these are your agreements that are in our meeting. Be present, ask questions, especially today. We got 10 of us or whatever. Let's ask some questions. And like I said, it's not a webinar, it's a forum. And so be ready to participate, please, because that's kind of how it's designed. Anything else? Anybody else want to put out there anything for agreements while we have this time together? Okay, well, if you do, please let us know. All right, so 10 ways to create. So, okay, there's only, oh, wait. How come that went too fast? We should have done our introductions. Hold on there. My computer. There we are. The pictures look better than us, CJ. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just quick introductions. Right. So I'm Zach Hess. I've been with the Generation Schools Network now for a couple of years. Before that, lots of years in education. Mostly in middle school, started out in youth corrections as a special education science teacher for high school 14 20-year-olds males, which was quite informative and actually a really wonderful experience. I then went into the middle schools where I stayed in middle school for a long time, not like go to middle school, but I was a teacher and administrator in middle school. And then I went to the district level where I was a prevention guy. So I was a director of health, wellness, and prevention. So a lot of SEL, restorative practices, trauma work, suicide prevention, bully prevention, all that good prevention work. Go ahead, CJ.
Hi, I'm CJ. I'm the director of Empowering Education. They're our partner company that sells our SEL curriculum. And then I also work with Zach in our health and wellness areas doing student wellness planning for school districts. And prior to that, I was more in the field of non-for-profit coaching. And kind of switched over once I moved to Colorado. So I've been with Generation Schools Network for about 5 years now. And I love the work we do. I just love helping people as much as we can. And I'm excited to be here.
Okay, that's the one. Okay, so 10 ways, right? Like there's 1,000. So these are Zach and CJ's 10. So if I didn't pick your favorite 10, don't be offended. But I think this is just from our experience, and I try to look at things like just a little bit more robust, I guess, some bigger things that are going on out there and how to make connections and create that community. So a lot of this comes from my experience with restorative practices. So our RP practitioners, and they're going to be like, oh, I recognize some of the stuff. I repurposed stuff for sure because I believe in it and I think it works for a lot of other things. So there you go. All right.
Okay, so going into that, we kind of want to talk about the why. Why is connection and community building so important for our students? And like Zach said, those were the 10 ways that we think they're important for students, right? As we're going into a new year and we're building that connection with our children in our rooms. Why is that so important, especially at the beginning of the year? And so you can throw it in the chat, or if you want to come off mute, maybe just throw a couple ideas of why for you it's important, or what brings you here, because you obviously think it's important if you showed up today. So can anybody kind of chime in?
I'll chime in. I'm driving, so don't have my camera on, but
just be safe.
I would say that community, and especially where I work, which is with sexually exploited girls, is huge in the healing process. and giving them a space where they can actually grow and learn and connect well with somebody and have a community.
Oh man, you hit it right on the head. That's what we pretty much put. Zach, if you want to hit the next slide, it's really.
Sarah had something though. We have to let Sarah shed her hand right.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, so last year I was a first year teacher and I wanted to focus on classroom management for my first year because I knew that was going to be challenging post-COVID. I'd heard lots of stories and seen stuff in my student teaching. But towards the end of the year, I realized I focused too much on managing and not enough on the foundation, which is relationship building. And I feel like I'm kind of taking a step backwards this year and trying to focus on putting those relationships and those connections first as a foundation upon which management can happen.
Oh, so right. That's so right. And that's what's been so difficult in our field is just kind of really reconnecting and refocusing that to like, we're so focused on the management, right? Like the control and the overall, and this is all the check marks I have to get done to be a good teacher. But in reality, when you think about who were your most inspirational teachers, it was really the connection that they built with you. It was the time that they took. So you hit it right on the head, Sarah, and sorry, I don't remember who else spoke up, but that was perfect. So it really is the most important thing is for health and learning is just having that trust and that protection and the creation of belonging. Like these are my people. This is where I belong. So I think that's great.
Awesome. Good job. All right. So we said it was a pathway to learning, right? And so we're talking to a lot of people that are looking, or working with youth and educating youth. So this little graphic, right? I'm sure many of you have heard Maslow's before Bloom's, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like just feeling safe, all those things that Maslow's talks about before you can get into really learning. And if we're taking care of those things, we are creating belonging, right? And that's that feeling, like CJ and you guys just said, as being, feeling accepted and valued and included. That's so important. And when that happens, we have definitely some neural pathways that are happening in the brain. This is why this is so important. It gets to the centers of the brain, the reward centers of the brain. A lot about stress reduction and being open. So being alert and flexible and willing to take risks and all these cool things that we want our learners to do. And that, again, right, that increases our attendance. One of the big things out there in the research right now is just how low attendance is and has been the last year and this year. And just, everyone's really worried about that in education. So I guarantee you, when you build a community where you feel belonging, that's the place you want to be, right? If you all think about your community and where you belong and how you feel, it's a place you want to go, even when you're tired, right? Even when it's like, oh, it's Thursday night or whatever it is, I'm going to show up because that's the place I feel like I belong, and it actually gives me energy. So we know the kids and our youth are going to engage. We know they're going to retain, and holy mackerel, they might even be learning, right? The whole thing that we want to happen. And then we got these great classrooms, and this then benefits us. So in this cycle to learning, all the adults that are in this for the right reasons, because we care about kids and we want them to learn, it's actually happening. So let's really work on that sense of community and connection and creating that sense of belonging. And it does well for all of us in education, or any of us working with youth.
Right. Okay. So as we sit here, I'm sure I can almost guarantee that all of us have probably had somebody that's been a trusted adult, either from our youth or as we've kind of grown up. And I just kind of want to take a moment for us to think, like, what was it really about that individual that we trusted, or what was it that made us feel trusted with them? For me, I had a pretty extensive athletic career, and I can name one coach that was just so such a big impact in my life. And there's a lot of reasons why he was a trusted adult for me. But I kind of want to hear why else, some other reasons you guys have of why somebody is maybe impacted you in that way. Family member, a coach, a teacher, something like that. But for me, it was a listener. Like he never had to solve my problem. He just needed to listen to it. And so I kind of want to hear what else you guys feel is important to be a trusted adult in a kid, and what you've kind of felt personally with somebody in a similar relationship. You can put it in the chat or you can chime in.
My significant adult was my 4-H advisor, and things weren't real good at home. And she really took me on and mentored me really from 7th grade through high school, actually, until adulthood when she passed away about 5 years ago. So she just made time for me and listened to me and encouraged me most of my life. So
I have heard so many people have their relationship with a 4-H. Actually, our CEO, her biggest mentor was a 4-H, was her 4-H leader.
That doesn't surprise me.
No, that's just like so great to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really awesome that you got to keep that relationship that long.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I saw Sarah, consistency and fairness. Yeah, that's so right. What else? Anybody else? I think for me
I
too,
would say, oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
I would say my trusted adult was my dad, but it was because he never expected me to fail. So he would give me these jobs that were really difficult, even for an adult. And I was a small, like upper middle school girl. And because he gave me that job with such authority and expectation, I found a way to do it. So I just that he because he gave it to me, he told me to do it, so I must be able to do it.
Yeah. And there must be, like, I am too, very close to my dad, and I was going to share almost the same thing. Is it's the encouragement, right? Like he's always been like, you can do anything. He just he's been the one that believes in me. So I think it's so true. Like just that connection of like, I know you can do it is so important. So these are just another few trusted adult things that I think are important as you go into your classroom to consider. Be dependable, follow up with what you're going to say, right? I think that's huge. I catch myself with my own children doing that. Be someone that they can trust. Listen. I think listening is such a huge one. I catch myself all the time trying to solve people's problems and fix it. I'm a solution-oriented person. And sometimes they don't need that. They just need you to listen and not solve the problem. Believe in me. Again, going back to that, like encouragement, motivation, regardless of your past, regardless of your abilities, you can do it. It may be a different path than somebody else, but you sure can do it. Making sure that they feel that in you. Being warm, loving. I think calm is also another one. I am a very enthusiastic person. Sometimes I have to remind myself that some people don't like jive with that. They need to be a lot calmer, and you have to really feel that with each student. And then encourage, praise, encourage their efforts. That one too, you also have to be really careful about. If you are over the top, which I am, some students won't respond to that. And all of this, I have to say, takes time to build with your students in a very short amount of time. So it's a lot of work. We get that, but I think it's worth it.
Definitely. All right. Number one. So number one, be a trusted adult. All right, Marion, you probably recognize this quote. I love this quote. I think it transcends restorative practices. It is just a great way of explaining relationships with students, relationships with youth, relationships with each other. I think it is a fundamental premise. And Ted Wachall was a big guy in the International Institute of Restorative Practices, but it's this premise that we are happier and we do things more willingly and better when we're doing things with those in authority, right? So if we're thinking about a classroom and that a youth and adult relationship, the adult's the authority, and that's okay because we need to be. But if we're doing things with our youth as opposed to them or for them, we're going to get a lot more out of them. And I think this is important. So I'm going to go through this kind of concept I'm going to use this graphic here, which is often called the social discipline window. There's a lot of variations of this. The goal of this is to say that we want to be in that width box. I'm going to explain each of those axes, that x-axis of support, the y-axis there of expectations, explain that a little bit more and what I'm talking about with this. But the goal is to be high on both those axes so we can be in that width box. And I want you to look at that brain state. And that's of that person that's in there with us. So the youth, right? We want them relaxed. If we're looking at an educational setting, we want them relaxed. We want them alert, like being alertness, meaning I'm ready to take in what you're giving me. I'm ready to participate, as opposed to some of those other ones you see there in the different boxes, which we really don't want. If you put your trauma hat on and youth impacted by adverse childhood experiences, you'll see where some of those brain states may come from. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to explain it a little bit more, but I just love this document or this illustration here to talk about some of this stuff a little deeper. So the second thing, so trusted adult, the second way to create connection and community is support all learners, right? Support everybody. And when you look at that x-axis, right? So the x-axis down there, support, nurture, incur. What I'm saying is, like, we are looking at all the different types of learners we have, right? What are their needs? You know, some kids are stronger in some areas and some aren't. So what kind of supports do they have? What supports do they need behaviorally, for their emotional regulation, for their academics, for their social interactions? Like, these are all important. So this is a huge thing, but it's massive. So there's probably like, 50 in just supporting all learners. But if we can do our best to really support those youth, then they're going to feel good. Like, this is going to feel like a community where I belong because I'm getting the things I need. Okay. And you might hear a student say something like that. If you see me struggle and support me through the struggle, I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel valued, and I know you care. Right? That's belonging. And that's a community anybody wants to be in there. You can get into that trauma-informed work. That's awesome. But all right. So that's support for all learners. 3 is growth mindset. So we got a trusted adults. We're supporting all our learners. And let's go into this promoting this growth mindset, right? Not the fixed mindset where, oh, I'm not good at school, or I'm not good at this. Oh, other people are better. Oh, this is too hard. I'll never do good. Those are those fixed mindset. We don't want that, right? We want a community where kids and our youth really feel like it's safe to fail. Like, I'm going to be held to high expectations, right? Someone said that about your dads, right? My dad held me to a high expectation. Yeah, it's backed by science. When we do that for our youth and we really say we believe in you, that is huge. Like, I want to be in a place that people believe in me and believe that I can do amazing things, right? We're going to celebrate in this community. When we set those high expectations, we're celebrating effort and grit and your attitude and all those good things. That's awesome, right? We're also going to have a lot of time in there for reflection, right? Thinking about their thinking, times to journal, times to do self-grading, these kind of things that help promote that growth mindset, right? I didn't do so well because, right? When you believe in me and my abilities to work hard and achieve great things, then I believe in you, teacher. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so that's growth mindset. We're going to talk a little bit more about this, but this is just a plug for our empowering education. CJ is going to talk more at the end, but there actually are lessons in our curriculum that specifically teach kids around growth mindset. And I just think this is such an important concept. Okay. Remember I talked about how important it was to be high on both of those axes and moving into that width box. So when we move into the width box, right, we're really at that shared decision making, and that's number 4. If students feel like they have a say in what's going on and the decisions that are made in this environment, whether it's a clinic situation or a classroom situation, it's just like us as adults. We like to be included. We like to feel like things are being done together, like that it's being done with us. And so that's part of that shared decision making. And I think that's a really big goal for all of us. I want everybody, I just want to have a conversation. We're going to do breakout rooms, but I don't think we really need to. But this idea that it's not the adults world, we're just visiting, right? This feels like our community. When we're operating like that, then it is our community. It's not just the adults. And I always push back on PDs and trainings on things about, how much control we want to have and how, in the classroom as the adult. And we are the authority. We need to be the authority, but making sure that we have shared decision making, I think, is so important. So I want us to have this discussion. Think about the decisions you made and who is affected. And then how do you engage those that are affected in the decision making process? Anybody want to share, like, just reflecting in the work that you're doing right now? If you think about a decision that you make for those youth or whatever environment you're in, how do you actually engage with them to make sure that they have some decision-making power? What do you got for me?
A good question, Marianne. Zach, I don't know if you can see the comments, but Marianne says, how can we change growth mindset with secondary students who are disengaged with school? Yeah. A really good question.
It needs a longer answer.
But I think that's
what the mindset's already not there.
Yeah. It's shifting the mindset, right? Because that's the other thing, right? We have to understand neuroplasticity, right? We have to understand that we can change. It's hard. And for some of these students that have had just a really negative experience, both in the home, I mean, there's so much that goes into this, right? When there's stuff that's going on in the home, we're looking at brain development. There's a whole lot of stuff here. I always try to go back to I try as much as I can to put my prevention hat on first, to think, how do I get out in front of that? And then what supports can I build after that? Like, after I know that's not working for those kiddos, but my first thing was like, how are we building connection and how are we doing that and building community? I mean, I think part of engagement, I truly believe kids do well if they can. And that's a Ross Greene quote, if anybody knows Ross Greene. I really do believe that. I think people do well if they can. And if we're not, there's something getting in our way, right? So what's the root cause? So get way out in front of this. Why is this mindset the way it is? Why are these kids disengaged? Why is their mindset the way it is? And then I think then we start to look at, okay, let's figure this out. Maybe there was never a trusted adult that encouraged them. Maybe it was not about, asking them and giving them choice and getting, their ideas around a decision making. Maybe that's been their experience in education, because I think that's been a lot of people's experience. Yeah. Right. I think we're starting to learn more and more around how we should be running our classrooms and our schools and how we should be involving youth. But that's just not all. It's not all out there. And so if you're a secondary student that's gone from, let's say you're a secondary student with adverse childhood experiences impacting, your outlook on life and your interaction with adults and other people, what has that school environment done to either break some of those barriers down or actually reinforce some of that negativity around adults and things like that, right? So yeah, it's a huge, that's a big question with a big answer, but yeah, I think this is part of it. Like, accept them in and do some of these strategies that we're talking about, because maybe it's just them feeling like they belong, even though they're a mess, right? Even though there's all this stuff going on, this teacher, Mr. Hess, still made me feel like I belong and that I'm important and I'm valued. And that's all it takes. I don't know.
That's what I was going to share, is like, I don't think that these 10 ways are like what we're trying to really evaluate how to do this is this
sequential.
Thank you. It's a circle, right? Like, they're all playing a part in each one of them. So by sharing decision making, you might be building their growth mindset. And so I think it's really showing that, yes, I'm a teacher. Yes, I know more, right? Yes, I am the person that's going to guide you, but I'm here with you. Like, I'm here still going and experiencing it with you, and really sharing that bond of that learning together, I think goes a lot further than we think. And so, I think like Zach, I'd like to know what other ways we're providing decision making. I think as simple, especially for younger kids, as providing two options, and you get to choose what you want to do. That's so huge in a person's autonomy as a little person, right? Like, you mean I get to choose? And I think that's like a huge step, right?
Yeah.
And just providing options.
I mean, this is like, to me, one of the big things I ask teachers to do is at the beginning of the school year, like it is right now, and you're talking about classroom expectations. Are they Mr. Hess's classroom expectations, or are they the classroom expectations? Like, is it all of our expectations? Because it's not my community, it's our community. So I want to involve them. Like, yes, I'm going to have a few things, like, some things that non-negotiables as the authority in the classroom, but why wouldn't I want to engage in that and say, you've been doing this school thing for a while. What's important to you in the classroom? What helps you learn? What are some expectations that we should have? I mean, just asking that question. How many times have you done a walkthrough or gone into a classroom and first day of school on the board or on chart paper are classroom rules and expectations? And the teacher spent a lot of time thinking through those, and they're all probably really awesome. And honestly, when you engage with their students, they'll probably come up with the same ones anyway. But like, they're all done, right? They're all done. Why not take a moment and engage with your kiddos, circle it up and say, all right, let's talk about how we're going to learn this year. This is our classroom. You're part of this with me. So what's important to you? Because this is what's important to Mr. Hess. Like, what's important to you? Oh my gosh, man. It's amazing when you let them talk and share. You will be blown away. You're just like, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. Anyway. All right, we'll move on. Moving on. Go for it, CJ.
Okay, so kind of leading into this number 5, clear expectations. Can some of you share what are some of your favorite things you do to establish expectations in your classroom? What is kind of your go-to thing that you feel comfortable doing that shows a clear expectation? You can throw it in chat, or you can come off mute.
We use contracts a lot.
Contracts
For, yeah, like how contracts on how you treat your computer and what you do with your computer, and contracts on when we do a field trip, what are the expectations of how we expect you to behave while we're on a field trip. And so we go over our contract before we go anywhere, and at the beginning of each year with the contract, so that if they violate the contract, then it's not a personal thing. You're not getting in trouble because you did something to me. This is the contract. You told me you were going to do this and you didn't. So let's talk about the consequences.
Got it. Great. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think providing examples of not only what looks good, but also what you don't want. And that's just kind of funny in class too. Like, I only permit a ball, if we're doing a game with the ball, to be thrown underhanded. And like each class, I ask a student, okay, now show me how I don't want it done. And we all get very clear about no overhand fastballs at each other. And they get a chance to get it out of their system and laugh about it for a second.
That's great. Yeah. I think both of you kind of shared kind of the 3 steps that we think are a really great approach in going into creating those clear expectations. So once it's engagement, right, Sarah, like you are authentically getting kids to engage in what's right and what's also wrong, like, and how that looks, and making sure that that's really active participation and understanding. I think you're also probably at the same time valuing opinions, right? Like, you might have a really good athlete in the class and he's thinking, or she is thinking, I can throw it perfectly where somebody else can't. It's understanding these are the rules no matter what. And I think that's really great. I think there's also the explanation. It's like the contracts, like this is explaining the reason and why a decision is made, and then providing the data of like, this is the contract, this is why we do it, and this is the consequence if you don't follow it. It's simple. It's pretty self-explanatory, black and white. Oh, one more back. There you go. And then really just setting that clear expectations of roles and responsibilities in detail. and just sharing that really clearly. I think it really promotes the class being on the same page and that community, like we're all in this together, we're all going to follow these. It also kind of makes it really clear that it doesn't matter what kind of background, skin color, religion, culture, we're all going to be in this space together, but we're also going to understand where everybody comes from too, and we're going to be really responsible and respective and kind of open to that. So I think those clear expectations provide that trust and also that comfort zone for students to know that they're safe.
Absolutely.
Can I point out another thing with the rules? Oh, sorry, I was eating, so I didn't want to use them. But when you have everybody come together and like decide on the rules and decide what they think is the best behavior, then you do not have to police. They will police themselves.
Yeah.
So they're like, nope, we said we wouldn't do that. So it's kind of nice because then it takes a lot of you have lots of sets of eyes.
So true.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. They're way better at it. Like they're just, and you teach them how to do that too, right? You teach them how to do that respectfully, how you handle conflict respectfully with your classmates. And like, what a valuable lesson.
Has anybody had that, like where you've built such a trust and a bond with a group of kids that they police themselves because they respect you? Like it's almost out of they're protecting your feelings because that's your job and that's what you got to do. So we're going to help you do that job. That's when you know, like, oh man, this is clicking. There's been several times where I've had a group of kids where we are just bonded like that, where it's like, I got your back, you got mine. And that's a really good feeling. And I think these are great steps that we're talking about to kind of build those bonds. And like I said, it's circular. It all feeds into each other. So just because you're working on one area, that's feeding another area, in my opinion.
It's like 10 Venn diagrams. They're all like,
yeah, seriously. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk about autonomy and building agency. Autonomy is like one of my favorite words right now. I think, and agency. We'll just kind of define both of them. Starting with autonomy. So a person's ability to act on his own or her own values and interest. Actually, will you hit it one more time, Zach? I think I want to talk about agency first. So agency is like almost that inner voice, that confidence, that Jiminy Cricket, where that voice of choice, timing and reflect to share thoughts, like assessing my own learning and knowing that I have the ability to do it, right? Like having the confidence, a sense of control of your own life, your capacity to influence your own thoughts and behaviors. You're in sync with yourself and it's internal, having faith in your ability to handle a wide range of tasks and situations. Your agency, that's maturity too, right? Like that's growing with maturity and that's developing at each stage. And that's a hard thing to do. And we're always kind of trying to help that agency, that confidence. I love to motivate. I love when kids feed off of that. So really giving them the confidence to like, yeah, I got that. I felt like as a kid, I had a lot of really good self agency. I coach myself through things. But it's a little bit different than autonomy, which is the actual action. So you can talk the talk, but can you walk the walk, right? Can you actually action it? Can you, go out to that soccer field, never know a single girl and start playing without ever meeting them? Like, can you coach yourself through that? And so those are kind of two things that I think are really important in youth and what we kind of glaze over because we're hopeful that it's maybe happening at home. And I don't think it is right now. Like, I think that's a really hard thing. It's not actually happening at home all the time. So I kind of want to know what ways do you develop youth agency or give them autonomy in your classroom? If you've even thought of it that way, I'm sure you have. But what are some ways that you're thinking that? Like, how are you coaching them internally and how are you watching them apply it? Redos? Fold. Anybody? It's a tough one.
mean, CJ, you talked a little bit about the, voice and choice. I mean, that's part of that autonomy, and because they youth want to do. I mean, they want to feel like they get to go in their own direction, right? It's developmentally appropriate as they get older and older and older, right? That they want to do their own thing. And CJ and I were just talking about my own lovely daughter who's now 14 and decided she wanted to take an AP class her freshman year, right? You got the autonomy, go ahead. I mean, I'll give you my suggestions on what I think about that, but go for it. Like you have autonomy because I want you to build that agency. I want you to practice making your own choices, but I'm the one that allows that, that we allow that to happen. I could have been like, no, I'm not signing that on your schedule. It's not going to happen, right? But then I'm not giving my daughter autonomy. She's a capable young woman, and I want her to grow up to be a capable person in this world. And so, yeah, go ahead. Right. And then that 2 weeks later, she's in the counseling's office dropping the class because it was too much on a brand new freshman trying to navigate high school. And I was like, that was beautiful. I was so proud of her. She made such a great choice. I was so good. She could have tried to suffer through that and just prove a point or be silly. And if we don't, my wife and I would have fought her more and more and more, then that might exactly would have happened. But she came up. That was agency. She's like, I got some control. Like I can make this decision, and I am realizing that this is not working, and I have the autonomy to change this. And she did, and she went and changed her. Like those are kind of things. But how are we doing that in the classroom? How are we doing that with your curriculum? How are we allowing kids to pursue passions about science? I was a science teacher, so I'll use that example, right? I mean, how do we let those interests guide them and be able to choose and learn and, make mistakes and all those kind of things? That's a community. That's building that connection, is that when you have a bunch of kiddos in there feeling like they can do that, and you're the authority in that classroom, right? That adult in the classroom, and you're allowing that to happen, you're providing opportunities with constraints, of course, right? It's not like we're in science class, but if you want to go and, go take some extra recess, that's cool. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying like, hey man, this is the next unit we're going to study. Here's maybe a bunch of resources. Hey, pick your project. What is something that really interests you? I want you to dig in that, go for it. I'm here to support you, right? High expectations, high support. Yeah.
Roberta says we use timers in our program so someone can take a break, but timers bring them back to the group. I love that concept. Like that's such a great thing. And, I have a lot of experience in more the athletic world, but what I loved about it is it's so actionable. So in swimming, obviously in individual sports, there's a lot of self-coaching you have to do because you get really, really nervous. You can't rely on anybody else. And you're getting up in front of something and all eyes are on you, right? There's nobody else you can blame. There's nobody else. Like it is your hard work and it's your race. And so like mindfulness and meditation and coaching plays such a big role. And that's what I like about our curriculum. It's mindful based. So even in taking tests, if students have high test anxiety, how are they coaching themselves through that to calm down? How are they getting their heart rate? How are they breathing? How are they taking a second to think about what's important? This is not the end of the world, right? This is just something to evaluate your skills and become better on. Just really coaching them through that agency and then getting them up in front of that test and taking that test. So those are like little ways that you could apply it in your classroom.
And that's going to keep kids coming back, right? See, they're running back to class, right? But truly, like so far, these 6 things, these are the things that are going to keep kids coming in, engaging and being ready to work and be a part of this community you're trying to build. All right, we're gonna skip through. We're gonna go to number 7, just to make sure we're staying on time here. I got something else in the chat. Just a second, let me check. Yeah, absolutely. They need to see it to believe it. And I think that's part of it. That's part of that practice. It's like, if you're never allowed to do something and make a mistake and learn from it and build your confidence, or make a choice and then make something happen out of it, because again, we're on that support axis. So they make a choice, but you're there to support them, not do it for them, but support them. Man, that's building that agency. Like I can do some of this stuff on my own. I don't need my handheld for everything, right? All right, number 7 strategy I 100% believe in, like I told you, I'm a big restorative practices guy. I've been doing it for over a decade. I think it just, I don't know. It can play such a role for a lot of things. And you'll see, I'll bring up another thing about it also. But I think being in circle is a great strategy to build community. I mean, this is why our indigenous people around the world have been using circles forever. And there's a reason for that, right? Protection, right? You think about way back when there was fires and there was things out there behind that. I mean, you had to look out for each other's backs, right? There was this sense of community, bringing everybody together without this hierarchy, to be able to talk about things, to be able to look at each other, to be in close proximity. There's a lot of just physical things about being in circle that build community just by doing it, right? Now, there's a lot that goes into this. There's books you can read. There's a lot you can Google. I mean, there's trainings. I went through a 3-day training. It was a little too long, I think. But I'm not a purist. So there are some people that are purist around circles. You will do you will always have a talking piece. You will always have your thing in the middle, your gosh, can't remember the name of it right now, but you'll always have all these stuff and you have to do that in circle. And I'm like, I think for me, it's situational, right? If I'm well practiced in it and I'm doing circles with my kiddos, and this is a school environment where we do this a lot, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. You can do circles to make kids feel comfortable. But at a minimum, to me, if you're just getting started, right, circles should primarily be used for proactive relationship building things. Okay. A lot of people you hear about restorative practices and doing circles for harm and conflict. Yeah, absolutely. But there are some really strict guidelines in order to do that properly and not do more harm. So,
hey, Zach, real quick, yeah. Marion has a question.
Oh yeah. Let's see.
This is my 11th year training in a K-12 district. And historically, we've had real pushback from secondary educators on using circles, even though we keep training on content circles. And I was just wondering if you have any advice or input that may help them want to do circles.
Oh, gosh. Hey, you and me both. I mean, I'm telling you what, yeah, that was my secondary was my biggest struggle for sure, man. And yeah. So some of the things I offered to try to help that, and I'm sure you've already done this, but I just needed people to participate in to see that it worked. So I actually offered doing it, right? I offered, like, especially the content circle. I was much more comfortable in a biology class than I was in a calculus class, but it doesn't really matter, right? I could still, like, give me the prompts, but I would go through it and I would give them structure. So a lot of times high school also, I feel like, are pretty structured, right? They're pretty much tied to the content. I got to get this done. And where elementary and middle school are a little bit more fluid and like, I'll get there, right? Like, I got stuff to do, but I understand the value of this. And then for some reason, there's a little bit shift in the mindset at that high school, secondary level where it's like, no, we're here to learn math and we're going to do it, right? Okay. I try to get them into the mindset shift of why this is important, right? I try to give them the research behind it, how this works to just keep the brain activated, how relationships, how that is so important and why this works, right? And then I give them something like this, which is kind of a checklist, which they like, that structure. And I say, look, you're in control of this. Do it like you do your lesson plan. Now, I don't think you don't, again, I'm not a purist, but all 7 of those, if you want to, they go beautiful if you do that. I mean, it's a lot of fun. It's awesome. But really what I believe in, you have to do 3, 4, 5, and 6 for sure, right? Like, I think it's really important to do a check-in because that's going to allow them to understand where's the temperature check in the room. Like, where are the kids right now? If they're like disconnected or they're just angry or they're just like that, you need to know that before you start just talking about stuff in a circle, right? And so I think that's helpful to give them this kind of guidelines. I think it's helpful to show them how to do, maybe the content one's not the first thing, right? Maybe the first circle you do, and I had my teachers do this in my middle school, and I know it's not secondary, but this is the 8th grade classroom. a science and a language arts classroom, right? Science classroom in particular, because they'll always say, "Oh, I can't move desks. I have tables. I have lab tables. How could I do circles?" You could stand around in a circle. Like, come on, people, work with me here, right? And so, like that's what I would do, and I would just demonstrate that. But it would be easy. First thing you come in you should be standing outside your door, shaking hands, high five, and knuckling, saying good morning. Zach, how's your day, man? Good. I'm glad to have you. Hey, CJ, so good to have you back in class today. How was that homework? Awesome. And then they just automatically form up in a circle around the tables, and we do a check-in. How's everybody feeling about the homework last night? That was kind of intense. Fist to 5. Fist, you hated it. 5, you rocked it. I just want to know. Okay, awesome. All right, let's go to our desk. Boom, that's a circle, right? And if I'm lesson planning it, I did everything kind of there. I had one discussion round or I had 0 discussion rounds. I just had a check-in, right? That's kind of the help. And I know that's like, there's so much that goes into this, and that culture shift to restorative practice and circle work, it's hard. But when you do those things, those check-ins, you don't have to be a restorative practice practitioner expert to build community with circles in the classroom. It just allows kids to feel like they're part of something. They're not in rows behind a desk. They're not hiding behind something. They actually, you set it up in a safe environment where we just go around and you let them skip. Right? If I have little kids in there and they don't want to talk, I'm like, hey guys, I want to hear one thing you're excited about math. And oh, by the way, if you don't want to share, that's fine. Just say skip. Right? Wait till they hear everybody sharing and how safe it is. And this guidelines and values, why that's highlighted, we have to set those expectations with our kiddos. We're going to do circle time. We're all going to share what's important for you so you feel safe enough to share. Because we'll share some happy things sometimes. We might share some sad things and hard things sometimes too. What would you need to feel safe to do that? Right? Oh, I know one. We got to make sure we don't have side conversations and we're not talking over, so everybody has voice, and that's sacred time for us, right? When one person's talking, what might help? We might need to use a talking piece so we can remember that it's our responsibility to listen to the person with the talking piece, right? All those kind of things. That you don't have to be like a 15-year vet in this to do this, right? Some of it just to build the community. Some of the tougher stuff, I would say dig in a little, but anyway.
I think it's funny that there's such a fight to it, but yet we use circles all the time as in our adult work. I mean, this country makes such a highlight on athletics. How does every athletic team start out before they start the game? In a circle, in a check-in. I'll guarantee you that those professional football teams, they do everything in that list. In my short corporate stint, we circled up before every time we hit the floor. Like it's just like, why wouldn't we do that now?
Absolutely. All right. I know we talked a lot. Any questions on that though? Because I don't want to leave that. I mean, I also don't want to scare people. I just want to make sure that people understand that when you get into like the harm and conflict repair and bigger circles where there's like circles of influence, like there could have been significant harm. You don't willy-nilly do that. You don't just like pop into a circle. You also don't do that if you've never done a circle. You don't do harm conflict circles if you've never done a hi everybody, how's everyone feeling circle. Let's celebrate circle. Let's get to know each other circle, right? It should be a 5-to-1 at least ratio, right? You're just doing a ton of positive, safe, fun circles. Any questions about circles from anyone out there? Like
I have a question. I really like your idea of the welcoming students and them going right to circle. I was wondering on the logistics of that. Are they putting their backpack and stuff down, like where they sit, or are they keeping it with them?
Yeah, that's how I've seen it done. I mean, we had this issue one year with a ton of students. We had really big class sizes, and I had a language arts teacher that had 45 kids in a classroom.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it was ridiculous. But that's that's good teaching, right? Like she just knew the importance of it. She set the expectation. She talked to the kids. This is what they did. They came in. It was like clockwork, man. They went in, they put their backpack by their desk, in wherever that was, and they did small group stuff, but then they got in around the outside and they got in this massive circle of 45 kids, and she was in circle with them, and she just looked at them all. And I observed her class so many times, and she'd be like, simple stuff is like, all right guys, yesterday was rough, how are we feeling today? Right? Like, hey, there was a fight in the school, I know you guys saw, like, that was troubling. I don't want us thinking about that, and we need to think about, reading what we're reading and digging into this literature today. Like, but I need this out in the open. Let's talk about how we feeling about what we saw yesterday. I mean, stuff like that, right? And she's brilliant, an artist of it. And her kids loved it. And then she's like, all right, let's go. All right, how fist of 5, where are we at for ready to move on to learning? You know what? And if she had a 1 or a 2 out of that, then she'd be like, I got you. Okay, I'm going to get people started, and I'm going to check in with you. That's the value of that. You tell me how you do that without doing a circle, right? It's the circle just makes that kind of stuff easier. And then, anyway, I hope all of you join us on our restorative practices ones, because we're going to dig deep into this in our SEL forums or our restorative practices. All right. Any more questions about that? And I do have to move on.
Yeah, we're almost at 5.
Yeah. All right. Restorative discipline. I told you I'd bring up restorative practice. Again, for community, guys, dig into this. Look into this. This is not the class for this, but I couldn't not say this in building connections and community if I wasn't going to talk about how this works, how this infinity sign works, right? We're building relations and community. We're talking about dignity, then respect when we're using restorative discipline. Dignity means everybody deserves dignity. Everybody has value. Right? Respect is earned. So I caution you, if you are in that school of thought that says my students need to respect me, I think you need to pause, hit reverse, and say, I need to earn my students' respect. Because just because you're an adult does not mean they respect you. And I'm going to come from the trauma lens on that. When students that have experienced adverse childhood experiences, 9 times out of 10, those are adults that have done that to them. And so they're wired different around adults. Okay, so be a trusted adult, earn the respect, right? Treat them with dignity. You'll earn the respect, and respect will happen. Then we can get into the accountability. When harm and conflict happens, because it will with youth, it does with adults. So it's going to happen with youth, right? We talk about accountability, not punishment. To me, the main thing about accountability is agency. With accountability, right? They are part of the solution, and it is inclusion, not exclusion, right? I am not kicking them out. I am not. I'm going to make you do the work, dude. I'm not sending you home. I'm not sending you out. No, man, we're going to do this work because it's our community, and that community, there's harm in our community, and you're going to be part of fixing that. Now, there's a whole lot of things that go into that. So again, not willy-nilly, but just have this, start shifting the mindset away from kicking a kid out of your classroom or out of your school or out of your program, and figure out how do we actually hold them accountable so they learn from mistakes, so they develop agency, right? And so we repair our community, because I'll guarantee you, when harm and conflict happen in a classroom, your community is harmed. The relationships are harmed. How do we build connection and community? We restore. We bring everybody back after things happen. Okay. Boom. We're on number 9, CJ. It's 5 o'clock. We're good.
Okay, great.
2 more.
Okay, so as you know, there's a lot, obviously, of work we're doing in inclusion and just making sure students feel like they belong, like we've been talking, even if they feel like they're the minority in the classroom or they're the oddball out. And as Zach said, I really feel like you can't incorporate inclusion unless you've done this work to build a community within your classroom. So you can't just like jump in and just start talking about race or religion or whatever. You have to understand where your students come from first. And in my opinion, you really have to understand that first before you can really start applying different things for your students to accept or understand or know about their classmates. And actually, Zach taught me this today. So, we learn all the time. I love this kind of thought of a mirror, window, and a sliding glass door, of like how you kind of apply that in your classroom. If you look at it as a mirror, like from a student's perspective, is the student seeing themselves within your community? Are they seeing themselves in what they read in their curriculum? Are they seeing themselves in the examples that you bring to the floor? Do they feel like they're part of that community? Are they seeing themselves? And I think that's a great way to look at it. You know, does each person feel like they are part of this family? The window, can students see the other students through the window? Can they look through the backyard and absorb and observe what their neighbor is doing, right? What their life may look differently from yours. I just explained to my kids how certain families have different priorities. It's not right or wrong. It's just their priority. It's what they value and what they put first versus another family. It's just a different expectation. So can students in your classroom see through the window? Can they absorb and observe their other classmates? And then the sliding glass door, can students experience the culture or traditions of others? So are you bringing in if you know you have a student that celebrates Cinco de Mayo or as a certain religion, or are you bringing that and allowing them to participate with their classmates for understanding, right? I don't think that we should be teaching anybody to join certain things. I think that's their own personal choice, but I think just being able to experience it with your classmates is special. So how can we do that mirror window sliding glass door? It's a really great way to kind of evaluate how you're bringing inclusion into your classroom.
And I know there's got to be experience more than what you and I have here, CJ. So
yeah, exactly.
It's only 5:02. So I would love to hear some examples maybe of what you've done with that kind of this mirror window sliding glass door. I mean, it's been around. I mean, I'm sure people have heard that, but other ways of making sure all kids are included. And sometimes we focus on like race and culture, but I'm talking about neurodiverse too. I'm talking about like everybody, all of those things. Like just how do you create belonging? So like I feel no matter what, maybe I'm not a strong learner. Maybe I'm, whatever, right? How are we using this to include them? Give me some ideas. Give me some thoughts.
I think if you give them different ways to express that they learned the material, some kids are beautiful writers, some kids are better at verbally letting you know, some are a magic with PowerPoint or art. And if you restrict them to something that they're not good at, they're not going to be able to tell you as much as they learned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that.
Or other examples. I mean, and that, again, the Venn diagram thing, I mean, that feeds into the autonomy and the agency and that feeds into all that kind of stuff. That example, that's a great example. What else is out there? Have you wrestled with this before? Or are people in your school district or your school wrestling with this? What have you seen? Y'all are going to wait me out, aren't you? Because the time's ticking.
I think I like to make connections and comparisons between, for example, I think about Dia de los Muertos and Day of the Dead in Mexican tradition and other cultures in Latin America too, and kind of comparing and contrasting that with like how we remember people who have passed on in our lives, and giving kids an opportunity to not only see into another culture, but also kind of connect with our culture as Americans, or their family's culture, whatever it is.
Love that, Sarah. And Sarah, you're a Spanish teacher, correct? Yeah. So, I mean, what I did in my schools is I actually went to, we had French, Spanish, Chinese in my middle school. It was a really big middle school. And also someone that just did they were kind of like overall culture, like kind of a language, like world cultures, they called it, right? those are the guys to go to as a resource, because they're immersing, they're doing the sliding glass door, the window, like in that class. They're trying to get them to experience not just the language, Spanish language, but what's behind Spanish. Like, what's the root of these, like, you know, that kind of stuff. They're the resource. Go to them and say, hey, how can I incorporate this in my blah, blah, blah class? I mean, this holiday's coming up. Any ideas? Like, we just got to, sometimes you just got to go out there and try to do it. And I think we have the resources in our building. So thank you, Sarah, for sharing, because that reminded me of that. All right. CJ.
Okay. So empathy. This is a hard thing to teach. I think sometimes some people are born with a natural empathetic soul, and some really have to work at it. And that's a tough thing. So we're just talking about 6 ways to practice empathy in your classroom. And so again, really quick tools for you to bring up in the moment when you're really looking through, adding ways to bring that community together. So listening actively, we can talk about that. Withhold judgment. Sometimes don't talk, you know, be understanding, show empathetic body language. I think obviously we as women are really good at that. Practice mindfulness. Again, really that inner voice of like talking through it and really evaluating it before you speak. And then ask open-minded or open-ended questions, which I think is so important.
You get to learn more about what's going on, right? So I can be empathetic. Yeah, right. I can understand.
Right. So one thing that, again, our curriculum is really centered around a lot of this work. So, and what I love about our curriculum and why we purchased it at Generation Schools Network was its ability to build community for teachers. And that's been kind of my biggest work. I've seen it in the athletic world. To get students and young kids to perform at high levels like that, they have to trust you. You have to build community. You have to build a bond. And I do believe that's why our country is so fabulous at sports, is we've been able to achieve it in that area, right? So how do we adapt it into the classroom as well? And these are coaching tools. Like, these are ways for you to go through, practice and bring ideas. It's like Pinterest for SEL, right? Like, oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to apply that tomorrow. Oh, I'm going to stop what I'm doing because my class is falling apart, and I'm going to try this lesson on empathy and compassion. And so we actually have 2 curriculums. We have the Generation Schools Network curriculum that talks a lot about circles and gives you a lot of really fun ideas of doing those positive circles. And then we've got the EE curriculum, which is really, really quick and easy. And so talking about teaching empathy, that's tough to do. So that's where a lot of this curriculum comes in to play. And yeah, so Zach is pulling up just kind of next steps. If it is something you're interested in, or you want the help, we do provide a free trial. I'll throw it into the chat. It's a 2-week free trial, and you can sign up again. So if at 2 weeks ends and you want more, you can kind of sign up. We do the first 2 lessons for pre-K through 8th, and then 1 lesson in high school actually gives you, it's 1 unit, 5 lessons and a project. So you can have access to that for free. I am the direct contact to that. So info@Empowering Education. If you just chat me up, I'm happy to send resources. I'm happy to talk to your administration team if you're having a hard time for them to grasp. I am responsible for the invoicing. So if you want to strike a deal, I'm happy to do that for you guys. So just let me know. Send me an email if it's something that would be helpful.
Okay. We're gonna have time for questions too, so don't worry. We're just getting through these, and then we'll open up to questions. But yeah, we have a lot that we can offer at Generation Schools Network. So we're hoping you stay connected. We'll be doing forums, newsletters every month. You know, and you can get on and look at our staff and look at what we're about. But you know, it's a really neat model of coming alongside schools and trying to work with them to see what they need, right? And first assessing the need, and then creating a plan to do that. We have, models where like EE, where you can purchase some of that curriculum and do those things. We also have models where, we work with you for grant or foundation funding or different sorts of funding where we can help write those grants and manage those grants and, and do a lot of the work within them, but that helps with the funding of the schools. So just different opportunities. If you go online and do that, you'll see a lot. If you just want to email, CJ or I and have a talk, we'd love to do that too. All right, before we get to the survey, I want to definitely make sure you have time to do the survey. What are any questions around this work, or anything you wanted to add about building community and connection, or something maybe you're surprised you didn't see, and like, why didn't you add that? I'd love to know. I'd love to hear what you have to say, because
what would we miss?
There's so many things. Yeah, I mean, this is, it's hard to come up with 10 ways. Like, we came up with the title and then we're like, oh man, I can only pick 10 ways.
I really loved the workshop when it said 10 ways to create community. I expected it to be like, play this game to get to know each other stuff. And this was far more helpful because it lays the foundation for doing those kinds of things. So it makes way more sense to me. And I'm doing a training on similar to this in a couple of months. So I really like the concepts.
Awesome.
So thank you.
Yeah, you can steal all of it. We just spreading the word, right?
Yeah.
Well,
And
were there people out there that were like, really, actually, I was hoping for like 10 simple things. and you just went all like crazy on me. I see Sarah nodding. Sarah was like, dude, I just wanted 10 easy things. So,
well, that's kind of something that I've struggled with in, like, I don't know, education classes, pedagogy classes in general, is it is a lot of theory. And when you get all the theory at once, it's really hard to implement it, especially, it's a really long process, like, which is, I did some coaching, I had an education coach for a little while last semester. It's so helpful because she was like, do this one thing. And that one thing I did that week, and then it just became part of class. But kind of going off of that, if you were to pick like 2 of these to put as the highest priority to work on, because I can't like, I can't focus on all 10. I can focus on like 2, I think. Which would you choose?
Oh, that's a great question. That's like going to the restaurant and be like,
yeah,
what is your favorite dish? Because they all look really good. Well, I think.
Can I chime in on that, on what I would say to do first?
Yes, please do.
So I would say pick the clear expectations first.
Oh,
because there's where your conversations can come in, help, and even like help them set those expectations, like let them help you, fix those expectations. And that will it's such a beautiful foundation for community and belonging. Like, if that's all you do this year, you will see a huge, huge difference.
I agree. I think clear expectations, and I know, Zach, you might have a different, because I don't have the circle practice experience in depth, like how to do it exactly right. But I think just like the simplicity of circle time to build, I feel like that helps you build your autonomy and your agency and your growth mindset, and it builds your trust. Like, you'll be doing it without even knowing you're doing it, right? Because you're just building that time with your students into your day.
That's why I was going to say, like, that adopting and getting into and learning a little bit more about circle practice would be my 1 or 2. I think the trusted adult, looking at those things and implementing those in your practice, like those, just consciously doing those things to be that person that's a trusted adult, the active listening, to be like figuring out how can I do that every day? Does that mean that I stand in front of the classroom, which I really highly encourage all my teachers to do. They should be out there, right? Not in the classroom behind their desk. They should be first thing in the door, shaking hands, bumping, fit, whatever it is, with their name. Hi, CJ. You know, how was your day yesterday? You had a track meet yesterday, didn't you? Like, you know, you're lit. So how are you doing that? And all of that, a lot of those things can happen in circle practice. And again, you start to be more comfortable with it. And exactly what CJ said, it just, there's so much that happens in that that's not even like, it's like unconscious, because we're creating what a community looks like. We're just making that happen. So those would be my two. Yeah, that's hard to pick.
That was a great
Thank you
question.
so much for that. And I think they do overlap. So it's like if I pick three, the other ones kind of melt in on their own. Like if I'm trying to be a trusted adult, I'm going to set clear expectations. I'm going to be empathetic. I'm going to try to have supportive. So I like that they kind of all meld together. So, but focusing on three still helps my brain not be overwhelmed.
I think you have to do, that's so smart, because it's just too easy to be overwhelmed. Yeah. I mean, you know, you're in circle and you're setting expectations, but not to add another thing on there, but you're doing that with, like, look at that graphic, right? I'm in this together with you. So, you know, when you look at setting clear expectations, remember that leading up to that was authentically engaging, explaining why we're doing that. But that authentic engagement really means I'm asking you, oh, that's agency and autonomy, you know, right? So that's what I'm, and if I do that in circle and I'm allowing people to have a safe place to share, like they feel like this is the time, we're in a circle right now. So this is the time I am expected almost to share, and it's safe because we've created these circle expectations. And I know if I say something, no one's going to laugh at me. My teacher's going to hear me. I'm going to be heard. And man, just feeling heard matters. You know, and then absolutely those clear expectations are there, and you always have those to refer to, right? And it's also, it wasn't my clear expectations. Remember, like we developed expectations together. You were all involved in this for most of them, right? I mean, for a lot of things, for the things you can. And so this is our community expectations, and we're blowing it right now. Like, we got to figure this out, right?
I think too, I think what I want to conclude with is, if you're doing this work and you're building this community with your classroom, you'll really know it when you make a mistake or you feel like you messed up. The rebound is so much quicker with your students, right? Like when I had autonomy with my athletes, or when they trusted me. I made mistakes all the time as a coach. I was a young coach, but because we had the bond, because we were in it together, because we were working towards something together, it was like forgiveness was always right there. You know, it was like we could always just move on really, really well. And I just feel like that's because there's this bond, there's this community built, and it takes work. And I think it's just so important, if you want your kids to be successful in the education side, you have to kind of build those connections to kind of get there.
I'm just glad that you came back for teaching for year 2. So that's awesome. Any other, I don't know if we have any young teachers out there on this thing, but if you're staying with it, God bless you, and
yes,
because it's hard. It's not an easy profession.
Well, one of the things I do love about teaching, I feel like this is thematic for what we talked about today too, is that it really makes me a better person. Like, truly, I have to work on myself. You can't fake this stuff. You can't fake being empathetic. You can't fake, you know, like, I don't know, restorative discipline and inclusion. It's not just like a job. It's something that I feel like is like becomes part of myself in all areas of my life. And I'm like, that's the kind of job that I want, that makes me a better person.
Oh, I love that, man. I might have to use that sometime. We were talking to teachers and trying to keep them motivated and remembering the purpose, like why they got into this in the first place. I love that. That's awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Very cool. Okay. Anything else? Any other things anyone wants to share? We go till 5:30. We got 10 minutes. That's about enough time to do this survey. So that's our kind of our last thing here. And we want to put that in the chat. Are you able to do that, CJ?
Yep, done.
Link. Okay. So you can click on that link. This is just a survey. How did this go? And then also an opportunity to give us input on, hey, this is what I'd like to learn more about in this kind of realm of this very broad realm of social emotional learning. There's a lot that we talk about. If things that we have planned are trauma responsive practices, to go more deep into restorative practices. There's a lot of ideas we want to talk about. How to manage or work with kids with behavioral issues and those kind of things. So there's a lot that goes, and then just some basic SEL stuff too, right? Just some of the basics of social emotional learning.
I was wondering, I'm not in the classroom right now, but I used to be a secondary teacher, but I'm thinking if I was teaching now and I had 5 or 6 different class periods, how would I, as the teacher, keep track of what each class's expectations and guidelines are? That feels really overwhelming to me, and I'm asking people to do that, and I'm not in the classroom, so I kind of want to know, how do you do that?
Yeah, and looks different at each, right?
Right.
Secondary, it looks different, right? Because right, yeah, I got 5 different classrooms full of kids coming in. What am I doing? Putting up a different piece of chart paper every time?
I don't know.
I've seen that happen. I don't know if that's the one I would pick. But a lot of them now with the digital stuff, like in the using like Canvas or Google Classroom, or doing however that whatever they're using. Each class kind of has its own page.
Yeah,
so that makes it a lot easier. Like when I was doing it, we didn't have those kind of things, right? And so even in middle school, I had 4 different, right? We had team, and I had 4 different classrooms. Not surprisingly, many of the expectations were very, very similar, right? So we may have had like a couple of different things, but in general, they were pretty close. And that was one of the things I just had. I had it on my whiteboard, and I had it by period, and we just go, hey, here's first period, okay, second period, and I just had them up there for a while. I don't know if that was the most effective way. I think this digital world where they have their own kind of pages for their things, it's just a nice reminder. I've also seen, which I thought was very cool. I did not do this, but I thought it was wow, you're really investing in it. And I think what they did is that kind of philosophy of 3 for 33 for the first 3 weeks of school. I had a science teacher that would just go over them at the class, like, hey class, again, here's our classroom expectations. It was sort of like going to and reading, like when you're part of an organization, here's our mission, here's our vision. Everybody, like every time you go to the monthly meeting, here's our mission, here's our vision. Well, this guy would do, hey, classroom expectations we all came up with, just to keep them fresh in our mind. And then I don't think he did that after 3. Like he was pretty like, I'm going to do this for the first 3 weeks, and then I'm not touching it again until I have to, unless I need to circle it up and say, hey guys, just a reminder. Our 4th expectation was, and I've had to address this about 4 or 5 times in the last week. So let's circle up. Again, he was a practitioner. He knew restorative practices pretty well and was comfortable, but that's an idea to do. I don't know if any other secondary teachers out there have a good idea. That'd be on our small little group of 11.
I went ahead and put our emails in the chat as well. So if you guys have anything else that you want to follow up with, please feel free to email us. As Zach mentioned earlier, we are doing 1 forum a month. We're holding off on releasing exactly when we're doing each forum, because we've been getting lots of great feedback on different topics. And so we kind of want to be a little flexible on if we need to change direction. And so we're kind of releasing 2 at a time. So hopefully we'll release the next 2 for September and October. You will probably always see Zach on these forums. I may be on there as well. But thanks, Sarah. We would love for you guys to come back. We usually have quite a few. We were questioning this August one, thinking, this is a very busy time. So please come back and check out Zach's restorative justice, a restorative practice presentations are awesome. I cannot speak more highly than it. So you don't want to miss it. If you guys do the feedback survey, you will get the certificate of participation in an email. I will only send that out to those that do the survey. So please make sure you fill that out. That's super helpful for us. You will probably receive 2 emails in the next 2 days. One with the recording and any resources we provide, and then one directly from me with the CEU. So keep your eye out for that.
Yeah. Thank you all for joining us.